Welcome to the SNN.Network Summer Virtual Event. We are pleased to introduce the next presenter for today's event, Ken Dionsermom, CEO of Medexus Pharmaceuticals. Ken, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone to the presentation this morning. I present Medexus. You can find our forward-looking statements at our website, which is Medexus.com. So Medexus is really a innovative and rare disease pharma company with commercial infrastructure built out in the U.S. and Canada, producing a significant net revenue. Last year we reported about $80 million worth of net revenue and producing positive EBITDA. So we've got a very strong commercial business and we're looking to continue to grow that business with the current portfolio and the launch of new products. So the business model is really described on this slide. Clearly, we have pretty significant organic growth within the portfolio. It has slowed as a result of COVID, but we do believe that there is a strong growth opportunities in that portfolio that will continue as we move out of this period. We build the business through business development. We are not an R&D company. We don't do our own research. We don't develop our own drugs. We acquire them and license them from organizations who do that work and are looking for a strong commercial presence in North America, particularly U.S. and Canada. If you do look at our financials, you will see we do have an R&D line, but really that is some late-stage product development. Typically, it's around improving the label of drugs in our existing portfolio, and currently we are spending some money on a pediatric study for one of our drugs called IXINITY. This next slide really describes who we are in terms of our field force, and this is really the selling feature that we have for our various partners, in that we've got infrastructure completely built out in both U.S. and Canada, and we have sales force that are able to take additional products and deliver them to the market. In the U.S., we've got 37 people planned. There are several people that we haven't yet hired that would be for a new drug that is moving through the registration process. In Canada, we have about 23 people. It's a larger sales force per capita simply because we have a much larger portfolio that you'll see on the next slide. So we've got a good team of people in the field, and then they are supported by people who would typically be in an office in Chicago or Montreal and Toronto. This next slide really describes the product portfolio, and there's a couple of important points to be made here. One, we do have a focus in various therapeutic areas. We're picking areas where the audience is small and can be reached with a relatively small sales team. So those areas are autoimmune disease, which is really rheumatology. And so we have various drugs for rheumatologists to treat various bone and joint diseases. And then we have a group that focuses on rare disease. And rare disease for us is Hemophilia B, which I'll describe in a later slide, stem cell transplantation, glioblastoma, which is a common brain tumor. Those are very small areas, small therapeutic areas in terms of numbers of physicians treating them, but good commercial opportunities with drugs that can make a significant difference in these people's lives. In Canada, we also have a pediatrics and / allergy team. We have a much broader portfolio in Canada, as I mentioned, and so we do have a broader reach in Canada, and the main drug for that group is a product called Rupall, which is a prescription antihistamine. The other thing to point out from this slide is that we have a very strong growth opportunity. Much of our portfolio is in its growth phase, and so we have continued opportunity to grow these products, in particular Metoject, IXINITY, Rupall. If you were to take Rasuvo into that group, that would make up about 80% of our revenue today. And so we've got a fairly concentrated revenue base, but expanding in that We've got several products that we're in the midst of launching, things like Trispan and triamcinolone hexacetonide in the U.S., Glio Land, treosulfan in Canada, IXINITY pediatric indication. So we've got a bunch of other opportunities to further expand that portfolio as we go forward. In particular, one drug called treosulfan. I'm going to spend a little more time on that. Treosulfan is a product that we licensed in February of this year from what we call Medac GmbH that developed the drug. Medac is the same company that we purchased Rasuvo from about 2.5 years ago. We like this drug for several reasons. First of all, it's an orphan drug, so it has a 7.5-year exclusivity through the Orphan Drug Act. So it's got good protection. It's a very focused therapeutic area. It's for stem cell transplantation. It's a conditioning agent prior to the transplant. It's a very attractive revenue opportunity in that a product that we compare ourselves directly to and we believe we're better than did about $126 million U.S. at peak sales a few years ago before it was genericized. So we think treosulfan has significant revenue potential and it has an excellent gross margin. So this could significantly grow our business should it get approved, which we think will happen in the next 12 to 18 months. I should point out that we did receive a CRL on this drug about 2 weeks ago. The agency is looking for additional information related to the already completed pivotal phase 3 study, and so that information is being gathered. There's no additional cost to Medexus for that. The partner is preparing resubmission. It's really just a delay for us, and we think this can certainly get done within the next 12 to 18 months. The drug is attractive for a couple of reasons in that it's a significant improvement on what already exists in the marketplace today. There's two considerations when you're doing conditioning for these patients, and typically these are leukemia patients. The indication we expect will be AML and MDS, two of the most common forms of leukemia. When you treat these patients with a conditioning agent, you want something that is fairly strong, and that's called myeloablation. So treosulfan is strong, it is myeloablative, but the problem with typical myeloablative therapies is that they're also very toxic. And so, many patients can't tolerate that. So they end up being restricted only to a certain group of patients, and others who might qualify for the transplant, they have to get a reduced intensity conditioning regimen. And the problem with that is it tends to allow the cancer to come back again. And so there's more reoccurrence in the cancer. So you're kind of trading off the myeloablation for reduced intensity, and that trade-off becomes a problem. Treosulfan combines the most positive aspects of those two strategies. It's myeloablative, but it's also very well tolerated. So more patients can tolerate this drug than the product that they previously used, which was called busulfan. So we've got a very, very good clinical profile for this drug. Therefore, we think it will do well in the marketplace. The clinical profile is described on this slide, whereby there was a head-to-head study of treosulfan, our drug, versus the drug they currently use often, which is called busulfan. Treosulfan produced about a 26% improvement in overall survival for these leukemia patients at 24 months. So it's a very dramatic improvement in survival for this group of patients. And so, that's a very positive development. In addition to the improved survival, there also is the opportunity perhaps to expand the group of patients who can undergo this treatment. This treatment is attractive in that if the patient goes into remission from an initial course of chemotherapy and then they have a stem cell transplant, it could be curative. The cancer may never come back. And so, that's obviously a very desirable outcome, and that's why they do these transplants. And so treosulfan, because of its better survival, there's high interest in that drug. We also do have pediatric data The slide on the right demonstrates about a 91% overall survival in pediatric patients at 12 months, and so obviously that's very good survival outcome for children. We like this drug also because it's a very focused target audience. There's only 174 institutions in all of the U.S. that do these transplants. About 74 of those do 80% of the transplants. So it's a very concentrated target for our sales force. So you don't need a big sales force to reach these physicians. The good news for us is that about 41 of those institutions already have some type of experience with the treosulfan. So they know the drug. They're hoping to get the drug soon so they can use it in their patient group. So we think we'll have good uptake relatively quickly after the product launch. We also have a very nice portfolio of products, as I said at the outset. Last year we reported almost $80 million U.S. of net revenue. So obviously we've got a good portfolio of products. One of those products is a product called IXINITY. This is for Hemophilia B. It's another rare disease. There's only 4,000 to 5,000 patients in the U.S. with Hemophilia B. Another 710 in Canada. So it's a very small audience, but they definitely need this drug. Basically, this is a factor 9 it replaces what's missing in the patient's blood that allows it to clot, should there be a bleed. And so it's a very necessary treatment for these patients. We have an attractive product in that its clinical profile has got a couple important improvements over what exists today. One is the recovery rate, 98% versus a competitor, which is 87%. Basically, all that means is that more of the drug goes to work. So you don't need as much of our drug as you need the competitor product. The half-life is also a little bit longer, and so you don't need to inject it quite as often. So that's another good clinical feature. So this drug is, doing about $30 million in the U.S. It's growing in terms of its demand in the marketplace. And so, we think this has got good opportunity to continue into the future, and that it's got patent protection out to 2030. And even at that point, because it's a biologic, we don't expect to have any generic competition. Other drugs that we have, and we'll start to make a contribution in the future. Triamcinolone hexacetonide in the U.S., or Trispan as its brand named in Canada. This is the longest-acting corticosteroid. So this is a very important feature for intra-articular injections. So that's an injection right into the joint space. You obviously want to use the drug that's going to last the longest because you don't want to have that procedure more often than necessary, particularly in children where, clearly they won't hold still for this type of a procedure. So you need an operating room and many other services in order to execute the procedure. So you want to use the drug that's the longest acting. That is this drug. We've got it fully registered, now reimbursed in Canada, and going about our commercial launch. And recently we announced that we had licensed the product in the U.S. And now have got it being distributed through the expanded access program in the U.S. as we work on registration. Another drug that we have that we're just in the midst of launching is called Glio Land. This is for glioblastoma tumors. It's a very important advancement in the treatment of these tumors. It's the most common form of cancerous brain tumor. Basically what it does is causes cancerous tissue to fluoresce pink when you shine blue light on it. So this makes it much easier for the neurosurgeon to extract the cancerous tissue and leave behind healthy brain tissue. Clearly you want to be conservative when you do that procedure, and this helps you do that and execute it well. Basically you do a better resection, which leads to better overall survival. And we have data that shows almost a doubling of 6-month survival in these patients. So this product has been launched now in Canada, and it will make a contribution as we go forward. And then, as I said at the outset, we've got other products that are making a very strong contribution to our revenue. A product called Rasuvo in the U.S., It's an auto-injector of methotrexate. It holds about an 80%, almost 80% market share in its market segment, so a very strong performer. Metoject is basically the same product in Canada, different brand name, also a different device. It's in a prefilled syringe rather than an auto-injector. It's got about a 24% market share. And then Rupall, which is a prescription antihistamine. This drug is growing 44% in unit demand, 4 years after it was been launched. So continuing to grow very strongly and making a significant contribution. I'm going to turn over to Marcel Conrad, our CFO, to describe the most recent financial results.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Ken, for that. Yeah. So next two slides, just brief highlights on our financials, pointing out to the graph, obviously on the right, the outcome of what Ken mentioned on the company, on the business. Really strong growth, strong fundamentals. You've seen that on the revenue side. Our fiscal year 2021 closed with record revenue, which translated at year end into a positive bottom line and start generating cash. So what you see now for Q1 is as we walk through the basically those different line items. You see on the revenue side, we closed at 17.3 million. Which was a little bit below last year. There were some discussions on IXINITY and on clearing the channel basically to match up with demand. We had a bit of a adjusted EBITDA there, which was negative. There was a one-off in there, for example, $2.5 million that we booked as a reserve due to manufacturing expense, and that produced a net loss of 6.6 million. We're still in a cash position that is roughly $10.7 million total liquidity, about $10.2 million of cash at the end of the quarter, and our asset-based credit facility in place. We put that in place last year, which is $20 million strong. Next slide. This is just a bit of an overview on the capital structure as of today, where the capital is coming from. One thing I want to point out that I took on this role about a month ago, and I think that there is a really strong push on growing the business, specifically in the U.S. And we got our analyst coverage there. We added Roth Capital to the mix to cover us. More in the U.S., to tell the story and move the company forward with the projections we have in the U.S. and further, obviously penetrate the U.S. market going forward. And obviously with the CRL, there's a delay in that process, but the prospects overall for U.S. market growth are obviously still there. Yeah. On the right hand side, just again the mix on the ownership and the warrant schedules we have. Yeah. So that concluded the financial section there.
Thank you, Marcel. This next slide really describes the management team. The one point I want to make here is that this management team has been in much larger companies, run much larger businesses that clearly we want to be. Adding Marcel, I think, was an important addition, and that Marcel's coming from CareDx, where they basically tripled many of the financial parameters in over a few years. So used to being in a very strong growth environment. The board is also very active. It's a nice mix of capital market experience as well as pharma experience, and a very involved board. And so, I think to try and wrap things up, if you're looking for value drivers in our business, obviously it's continued execution, with the existing portfolio. We've got almost $80 million of revenue. We continue to execute and add new products. And so, we see that as growing. We clearly want to add scale as we go forward. We've got several new product launches that we're working on, some that are already in the market, others like treosulfan that we expect in the future that will make significant contributions as we go forward. The FDA approval of treosulfan, we think it'll happen in the next 12 to 18 months. We just got it approved recently in Canada, and we're going about launching it in Canada next month. And then, clearly, we will continue to look for opportunities to acquire and in-license more products. I mean, our view is very much that we're looking to build additional products into our portfolio and layer them, on top of the infrastructure that we already have. As we do that, the SG&A as a percent of net revenue obviously declines, so we get good leverage out of each product that we add. And when you're doing that at strong gross margins of 60 plus, then that makes a significant contribution. And that's really the story that we have. As I mentioned, we're very much a commercial stage product, so a lot of the registration risk and the development risk is gone. We've got a lot of products already in the market, and we're continuing to leverage what we've got as we go forward. So happy to take any questions that people might have.
Thank you, Ken. We've gotten a couple of questions on this. Can you please clarify the timeline for treosulfan approval?
Sure, yeah. So, I said it's probably 12 to 18 months. As I mentioned, the agency's looking for additional data related to patients that have already completed the trial that was run several years ago. So it's not new clinical data that's going to take a long time to generate. It's collecting information that is already being collected and putting it in a format that's presentable to the FDA. So that's a much easier task. The outside window would be 12 months. You have 12 months in order to respond to a CRL. We certainly think we can respond within that time frame, and then review takes 2 to 6 months following submission. So at the very outside, it's 18 months. We think we can do it more quickly than that. So, we think it's in the range of 12 to 18 months to approval.
Got it. Thank you. Next question. What is IXINITY's efficacy, ease of use, and pricing versus rivals, and does the end of discounting change the competitive dynamic? Yeah,
it's a good point. So the pricing of IXINITY is about the same as competitive products. So no one has any strong price advantage. And the market's not very price sensitive, and that it's a rare disease. It's absolutely necessary treatment for these patients. So payers haven't really pushed back on pricing, and there's no need to do that. They're all kind of in the same range. And so as we pull back discounting, patients are stable on our drug. And so there's little desire from the clinician to make a change, which could disrupt the patient's situation. It might cause more bleeds. It might cause other complications, which would be costly to manage. So there's no desire, if the patient's doing well, to switch products. So as we pull away the discounts, we don't expect demand to change. It'll be solid. But what will change, obviously, is our gross margin will improve by the amount of that discounting.
Thank you. Next question. Are you able to share any details on the $2.5 million manufacturing expense?
That's a question I'll pass over to Marcel.
Yeah, certainly. So what we have we're working with a contract manufacturer on one of our products, and as part of that, it's a usual process to go through provision discussions, and there have been some failures, batches out of spec, and then we took a provision that thought would justify a potential write-off. So this is a provision at this point. And we'll obviously continue to look at this situation very closely and try to mitigate it as much as possible.
Thank you. Next question. Can you tell us about the profitability of the core business, excluding Trio and IXINITY, and can those lines produce cash to pay for costs related to IXINITY, Trio, or buying rights to future products?
Yes. I guess last year, obviously didn't include Trio, so that shows, what can be produced from the portfolio, including IXINITY. I don't think we've looked at it recently excluding IXINITY, so I don't have those numbers on the top of my head. But, we think the core business, clearly is very strong. You put IXINITY back to, ex-factory sales that match demand, and you'd see like a $6 million increase in quarterly revenue. And so, this situation that we're having now is very much temporary as we correct the channel, and then IXINITY ex-factory will go back to and match demand more closely. And so it'd be a significant improvement in what we recently reported.
Great, thank you. Next question, what is your current cash position, and do you have any concerns regarding liquidity in the next few quarters?
Yeah, another good question. I'll pass that over to Marcel.
Yeah, good question. So as I mentioned, we've ended the quarter with over $10 million in cash, and we had already spoken earlier, even before this year. We're looking at non-dilutive financing, talking to partners to look at our cash position for the next quarter now to bridge that interim period. Now with the delay, obviously we've got costs that will lift and shift. We got a revenue that will lift and shift. There's no additional payments due because of the registration, so some costs got pushed out, but we obviously continue to monitor our cash and liquidity position very closely. And as I mentioned before, looking at various options specifically on the non-dilutive financing. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Next question. What is the timeline for the NASDAQ uplisting?
Yeah, we had announced that we had applied for the NASDAQ uplisting. In the interim, we got the graduation on the TSX from the Venture Exchange to the big board, so we were pleased with that. We're now looking at the NASDAQ timing. Obviously, we were hoping that the event that would trigger that would have been the Trio approval at the PDUFA date. That's been delayed, so we're reconsidering exactly, when it makes sense to pull that trigger.
Okay, and I think we have time for one more question. What are the near-term catalysts that investors should look out for?
Yeah, I think continued growth in the portfolio. I think the IXINITY returning to strong revenue growth again will, make a pretty significant difference in our quarterly financials. So I think that'll be important. Clearly, the process for treosulfan as we sort out the timing on approval of that, and I think that's another really important catalyst. And we continue to look for additional opportunities that will leverage existing infrastructure. So, I think another important catalyst is as we work through various business development projects that we have on the go.
Okay, thank you. I think, we're close to the time of the presentation. So, Ken, I'll turn it over to you for closing remarks.
Great, thank you. I just want to thank everyone for joining us on the call today. And certainly if you want more information, there's a lot available at our website, medexus.com. Thanks, everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude the Medexus Pharmaceuticals presentation. Thank you for joining us. You may now disconnect.